I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: what do I think of the imprisonment of Tommy Robinson? First of all, let me start by saying that I don't really know much about the original court case that Tommy Robinson was live streaming outside of, and that live streaming led to his subsequent arrest and imprisonment. I'm not going to comment on that case because I don't know, apart from a very few little basics that I've heard reported, I don't know really anything about it. And I don't know whether the suppression order that exists around that case was a good and legitimate thing, which really was about the protection of the victims and about justice being heard in a fair and proper way, or whether in actual fact Tommy Robinson wasn't being irresponsible by live streaming outside that trial. Instead, he was actually doing something important and was being an agitator and a voice of conscience to say to the British people, hey, wake up, look at what's happening in your midst. I don't know whether it's irresponsibility what he did or whether or not it was a necessary thing, because I don't know much about that case and I'm not going to comment on that. One thing I will say though is I totally understand the necessity of having suppression orders around court proceedings. There are good reasons, particularly when you're talking about sexual offending, and if that sexual offending involves minors, around the protection of victims, and we have those sort of suppression orders in our country around the trial proceedings. I understand all that. The thing I don't understand though is what happened to Tommy Robinson subsequent to his breaching of that suppression order. First of all, he received a 13-month prison sentence. Now, I understand there was a previous 3-month order hanging over his head, which was added to the sentence, but then he received another 10 months on top of that. And to me, 13 months seems like an awful long sentence for breaching a suppression order, for releasing information into the public about a trial in the way that he did. He did break the suppression order. So I can understand why these things are necessary, but 13 months does seem like an awfully long sentence for breaching a suppression order. But even more important, and I think even more troubling, and this is something we should all be concerned about, is the fact that a suppression order, a gag order, was then placed on his sentencing. So this prevented media reporting about the fact that a UK citizen had been arrested, had been charged, and had been sentenced to 13 months in prison. I don't see any reason why you should have secrecy around the imprisonment of a person. I can understand having a suppression order around a trial while a trial is happening, but once the trial is finished and once the verdict has been issued and sentencing has been given, well, at that point, why do you need any further secrecy? And this is really troubling to me because I don't think that the courts should be able to act under this kind of secrecy. If it wasn't for a couple of media organisations who went and petitioned the courts to have this gag order lifted, that gag order would still be in place. And you'd have a situation where a British citizen had been arrested, charged with the crime, found guilty of the crime, and sentenced to 13 months in prison, and that had all been done in secrecy. The whole thing, including his imprisonment. Now, to me, that's really, really troubling. One of the facets of good justice is that it should take place with an openness and with a transparency. You should not have courts, I think, that are able to put people in prison under secrecy so that no one can find out that a person has actually been sentenced and sent to prison for a crime. That seems to me to be a very serious violation of natural justice. And it raises serious questions about whether or not this is more like the actions of a police state rather than a proper, fair and open judicial court. Now, the thing about this case is that a lot of people seem to want to put Tommy Robinson on trial for his ideas or for his methodologies, the way he goes about promoting his ideas or being the voice that he is in British society. I think that's a mistake. The whole point about justice is that it's supposed to be blind, and part of that blindness is that it doesn't act in a prejudicial way against a person simply because of their past or the ideas that they hold or the methodologies or the way in which they conduct themselves in society. Instead, it's about the specific crimes that they are charged with and whether or not they are guilty. So I would say don't focus on the question of who is Tommy Robinson and what does he stand for. Focus instead on the question of what just happened to this United Kingdom citizen. What happened to this man? How is it that the courts are able to imprison someone and then hide the fact from the public by putting a media blackout on this, the fact that a person has been sentenced and imprisoned? That's the thing that we should be asking some pretty serious questions about. And to me, like I said, this looks more like a police state. And that is extremely troubling. It seems to me that this is something that possibly is a hangover from that sort of post 9/11 era, where all of a sudden we started suspending habeas corpus and just all due process went out the window because of political concerns or fears about terrorism, and we just started grabbing people from their homes and conducting secret trials and then secretly imprisoning them. And it seems to me now that this sort of idea is worryingly starting to take root on the home front for the British people. Now, I don't think it should be happening anywhere. I think the whole point of natural justice is that you are never supposed to suspend natural justice. It's not about the end justifying the means, right? The whole point is that natural justice is so essential to ensure that you don't ever have a corruption that enters your society where those in power are able to wield a power that is unjust over their citizens. They are able to act in ways that are unfettered and uncontrolled because there is no openness and accountability about what they're doing. And in this case, I think we've got good reasons to ask why the fact that he was sentenced and imprisoned was suppressed and hidden from the British people. Remember, if those media outlets who went and pursued a court action hadn't done that, then that gag order would probably still be in place. The floor is now open. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That's right, I hear my theme music too. I'll see you next Monday on The Daily Question.